And before this video begins, I'd just like to give an extra special thank you to my Asbantium level patrons, Chris Douglas and Fallon Cortez. Thank you for supporting the channel. Doctor Who has a problem. Okay, maybe a few problems, but this specific one has been a problem for a while now, and it's something that has come to the forefront in Season 2. I am, of course, talking about the United Nations Intelligence Task Force, or the Unified Intelligence Task Force, or as it's better known, UNIT. UNIT is one of the oldest and most notable recurring parts of Doctor Who, with the group first introduced all the way back in 1968 and appearing pretty regularly ever since. People love UNIT, it's up there with the TARDIS, the Sonic Screwdriver and the Daleks as iconic Doctor Who iconography. Duh, that's kind of what it means. We love the red or blue berets, the boots on the ground and the clashes with the Doctor's compassionate approach. But recently, something has been missing from UNIT. They're a shadow of their former self. They've lost the source and aren't the cool or interesting presence they used to be, despite being focused on more than ever before. There's a big world building issue in the current era of Doctor Who, and UNIT is right at the heart of it. UNIT used to be so compelling, so cool as part of the Doctor Who world. So, what went wrong? How did it all come falling down? How is it actively damaging new episodes? And how can it all be fixed? Well, that's why I'm here. So, together, let's take a look at Doctor Who's UNIT problem. Despite Doctor Who being a largely anthology-based show, flitting from one side of the universe to the other each and every week, there is obviously a fair amount of world building going on with recurring alien races and worlds like Gallifrey. But despite having all of time and space to play with, the most common setting of Doctor Who is actually present-day Earth. So the world building of our real world is essential for creating a sense of cohesion and interconnectivity. This arguably started with the Abominable Snowmen, which introduced the Yeti and Professor Travers, who both then reappeared in present-day London for the Web of Fear, which also introduced Colonel Lethbridge Stewart. One season later, we revisit him as the newly christened Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, head of UNIT. The invasion was mostly a backdoor pilot of sorts preparing the show for its grounded approach in Season 7, which saw the Doctor becoming a reluctant part of the UNIT team, and thus paying off all that lovely world building as we saw more of the Brigadier and other UNIT members like Liz Shaw, Benton, Yates, and Joe Grant. Hell, the Doctor even had his own special yellow car named Bessie. UNIT was a narrative means to an end, a way to enrich the cost-saving, refreshing Earth-based stories of the early Third Doctor era. But once he could travel in time and space again, what was the point of UNIT anymore? Almost every traditional sci-fi show has a sense of a ground control, or a team, an organisation providing soldiers and weapons to give us some action. So even when Doctor Who moved back to its traditional adventures among the stars after Terror of the Zygons, there was this idea of, well, UNIT doesn't stop existing, we can revisit it whenever. So you get classic Who stories like The Android Invasion, The Seeds of Doom, Mordrin Undead, The Five Doctors and Battlefield revisiting UNIT and the Brigadier. Because why not? After all, UNIT is part of contemporary Earth. It makes sense for them to show up sometimes. They weren't nearly as prominent as they were during the time of the Third Doctor, but they were established and already fan favourites, so it was like dropping in to see old friends. It made a lot of sense, therefore, for Russell T Davies to bring UNIT back when he revived Doctor Who in 2005, featuring the organisation as a presence in Aliens of London, before upgrading their role in the Christmas Invasion and properly cementing them as a prominent part of his world building in Series 4. It's clear that Davies understood the benefit of an Earth-based organisation like UNIT, a group to shoot at the aliens on the Doctor's behalf. And with how interconnected this specific era of the show was, it just made a lot of sense to incorporate a recurring military presence as the human race decides it needs to defend itself more seriously against these aliens. UNIT played a central role at the end of the 10th Doctor era, before returning in Series 7 and having a really notable presence during the 12th Doctor era, giving him plenty of soldiers to shout at. But ever since UNIT's third modern return in Flux, things have just started to feel off, and it exposes a much longer term issue with them. Let's look again at the scale and structure of UNIT. At first, it was a small military task force with a very domestic focus, very basic tech like conventional weapons, jeeps, radios, and sometimes a sci-fi gadget. It was all very clandestine and hidden away. Even the headquarters was an unassuming Ministry of Defense building in the countryside. It was also bureaucratic and, well, normal? Something you'd expect out of James Bond with how regular the offices were despite the things they'd get up to on a daily basis. It was answerable to the UN and the British government, so UNIT's abilities were clear and defined. They couldn't do certain things without permission or clearance, explaining why everything usually came down to this very small group of recognisable faces. We know the Brigadier Benton and Yates aren't the only important UNIT members in the world, or the only members period, but due to their proximity to the Doctor, who was grounded and forced to work there, it made sense why they would constantly show up as just a small unit. No pun intended. Liar! It crafted a sense of almost coziness and homeliness, despite the very nature of UNIT as a military organisation. And when they came back in the mid-2000s, there was almost the opposite approach, changing with the times. UNIT was vast now and essentially faceless, with significant firepower and capabilities, but no recurring brigadier-type leader, and things were still shown very locally, with things like mobile headquarters and small task forces. Even when Martha joined up, she was just one friendly face in a sea of interchangeable red berets or doomed side characters. And these are two extremes that work incredibly well. On one hand, we have a tight-knit, grounded setting with consistent characters akin to something like Dixon of Dock Green or Zed Cars. And on the other hand, we have this huge yet arrogant organisation that can just fill any Earth-based world-building without much explanation needed. But ever since the return of UNIT in 2012, it's tried to do both, which has worked less and less as the years go by. There's a clear sense of progression through the years of UNIT. In the 70s, it was very small and intimate, with an emphasis on espionage and infiltration. In the 80s, it was growing into a more serious military organisation. In the 2000s, the tech had vastly improved and it had more control and personnel. In the 2010s, UNIT was more global and we had a bigger glimpse of the inner workings again thanks to the Black Archive and the recurring Kate Stewart and Osgood.
Why am I saluting?
Their base still felt pretty clandestine, being in the Tower of London, truly like a secret base. As the real world became more developed and technology focused, so did UNIT, since we had these very sophisticated resources like memory wipes, bioweapons and advanced labs. Hell, they even had a presidential plane for the Doctor. UNIT would appear more and be more narratively important during Series 7 to Series 10, arguably the perfect blend of the two extremes from before. But ever since, the state of UNIT has become quite awkward and clunky. Despite the nature of it being a multinational military organisation, there's been a concerted effort to replicate the same consistent cast, homely atmosphere as the organisation's original incarnation, despite having more of a public presence and more advanced tech than ever before. There's all sorts of advanced, flashy technology like time windows, Z-Dexes and the Vlinks, who is just there for reasons. But most glaringly contradictory of them all is this giant Avengers-esque tower in the middle of central London. UNIT has become S.H.I.E.L.D. Despite it narratively making sense that UNIT would be more advanced than ever, it betrays the very nature of the organisation to have this massive tower. I mean, Torchwood got away with it because it was unmarked, hidden within Canary Wharf. But now this UNIT tower literally has the branding all over it because they're just a well-known, normal organisation in the Doctor Who universe now, despite the wider public still not even knowing or believing that aliens exist. UNIT is too big now, far from the scrappy underdog vibe they previously thrived upon.
UNIT is supposed to be a security organisation.
Do you think I might attract attention?
It's just possible.
Any episode in modern-day Britain is forced to include UNIT as a major player. They're relied upon too extensively for a sense of spectacle rather than making sense and having an impact. The current UNIT has the size and capabilities of 2000s UNIT, but the employee roster of 70s UNIT, and it's not a combination that works. We have Kate Stewart, Shirley Bingham and Colonel Ibrahim, sometimes Mel Bush and then sometimes one-off characters. No matter the threat, no matter where in the UK it happens, it always reverts to these same people and this same goddamn control room they're clearly trying to justify the cost of building. For such a big organisation, it feels absolutely tiny, more like Torchwood 3. Compare this to previous modern stories. The Christmas Invasion had Major Blake. The Sontaran Stratagem had Colonel Mace and Captain Price. No, not that one. Stolen Earth had General Sanchez in America, and then Planet of the Dead had Captain Magumbo and Malcolm. Even in the Zygon Invasion, we got Colonel Walsh. Each story, there are new important characters representing UNIT, which helps to further establish the scale of the organisation. And yes, emphasis there on importance. The Vlink shows up every time a new unit, and he's literally pointless. Why is he here? He just Googles things or just disappears. Oh no, the Earth is in danger. We better call the only 4 people that can actually do anything about it. This is the fundamental issue when you try to mix the abilities and scale of modern UNIT with the personnel size of classic UNIT. In the 70s, it made sense for the Brigadier to show up all the time because of the grounded sense of the show at that point. And also just because he was a legitimately good character.
Shove for the wings there. 5 rounds rabbit.
The perfect uneasy ally and comrade for the Doctor to work with and clash with depending on the scenario.
Just a precaution, Doctor.
Shoot first and think afterwards.
There was a mutual respect there, the Brigadier often deferring to the Doctor because of his clear knowledge and experiences. Sure, he could be a bit pompous and authoritative at times, but he had a clear sense of conviction and charm as a counterbalance. The Brigadier was the perfect figurehead for UNIT, and he was brimming with character and presence. His daughter Kate, however, I feel lacks this sense of presence and character, despite being in 11 stories. Sure, that's still half the Brigadier's appearances, but who really is Kate? As a person, Kate Stewart is fundamentally reliant on her relationship to the existing and celebrated character she is directly related to, and therefore directly compared to. Every episode she appears in, her father is brought up or referenced, lessening Kate's own presence and authority.
So you're bringing Daddy along too, that's very sweet.
Even her Season 2 standout moment in Lucky Day was kickstarted by villain Conrad calling the Brigadier a coward. Even though Kate is a rejection of the traditional Nepo baby dynamic, even eschewing her full family name, her main character trait is still being the Brigadier's daughter. As our narrative head of UNIT, Kate is a fantastic concept portrayed by lazy writing and a severe lack of characterization. Over the last 13 years, Kate has been very stagnant as a character. She's hardly grown or developed, and she almost never even clashes with the Doctor, which is an essential characteristic for a UNIT leader. One of the cornerstones of UNIT, and the Brigadier specifically, was how much of an opposition it could be. After all, from their perspective, the Doctor could potentially be just as much trouble as any of the aliens or monsters invading. So they always have to be ready. The Brigadier perfectly towed the line of friend and superior officer. The regular clashes in ideology and approach made things so fascinating to watch. But Kate completely lacks this kind of nuance, and it's a wider problem with UNIT as a whole in the current era. Kate is a very respectful and humble ally of the Doctor, never really willing to challenge him or go behind his back. The closest she has ever come to doing so is in the Zygon inversion, when she was prepared to pull the ultimate trigger against the Zygons, clashing with the Doctor to great narrative effect. It was a fantastic moment, but it was just that, a passing moment. During any other crisis, she's a complete yes-man character, following his orders to a T and completely removing that sense of an uneasy alliance.
You have my permission.
Thank you, Doctor.
The Doctor reluctantly respects and accepts UNIT because it's the devil he knows, compared to the regular military, which is much harder to work with and a more unforgiving, unbelieving beast that doesn't know what it's doing. But when every UNIT member stares at the Doctor with a sense of reverence and hangs on his every word, there's almost no reason for them to exist anymore. To again explore the first Davis era, characters like Mace or Magumbo would work against the Doctor because they believed they were right, they were following protocol with or without him until he proved them wrong. But now that we have the same consistent, unevolving cast of UNIT personnel, they have no reason to doubt or clash with the Doctor, and it ruins any sense of tension. In the 70s, Benton was usually always on board with the Doctor and more friendly with him than even the Brigadier was. You who obviously had to deal with a lot more protocol and stress due to being a higher up. But Kate, Ibrahim and Shirley all treat the Doctor in the exact same way, and it's boring. UNIT have become irrefutably good guys, with a clear lack of balance. Even their questionable actions, like kidnapping a reporter and bundling him into the back of a jeep, are throwaway moments with no consequences and never even get mentioned, or they're just laughed off as jokes. The whole point of UNIT is that they're neither good nor bad. They usually have to make a lot of the difficult, potentially deadly decisions the Doctor's morals don't allow him to make. In the Silurians, UNIT couldn't risk the Silurians bringing an army to the surface, so the Brigadier killed them all in a moment that outraged and horrified the Doctor. In Journey's End, Martha was prepared to use the Osterhagen key and completely tear Earth apart just to spare it from the horrors of the Daleks. And as mentioned, Kate was ready for truth or consequences. That just isn't the case with MC UNIT. The only morally questionable thing that has been presented as such is when Kate sets the shriek on Conrad, which sees her going too far, but then it immediately gets dropped. Even when Ruby is saying she needs to go away for a while to process things, she doesn't acknowledge how scared she was of Kate herself at that moment. UNIT is a dark, flawed protector of humanity, and it should be presented as such. Hell, Torchwood even showed us that the organisation has brutal black site prisons for disappearing people. MC UNIT has massive power with next to no accountability. Everything is so clean and they're almost deified as these perfect heroes, benevolent good guys who can do no wrong. The show has started to present UNIT as a small, tight-knit family, rather than the colossal, unpredictable and advanced military they actually are. It's a contradiction that completely narratively neuters them. They're not a small group of scrappy underdogs. They're not a sprawling organisation navigating a complex web of ethical dilemmas, opposing the Doctor's ideology and morality. Instead, like I said, UNIT are just boring now. The entirety of MC UNIT can be summed up with the Vlinks. It's shiny, it's flashy, but it's all for show and serves no useful purpose and offers no sense of compelling narrative function. They show up constantly now, so it's not special when they do. Yet at the same time, they don't warrant such a constant presence, because of the show's nature of changing settings. They're a painful reminder of how often Doctor Who resorts to present-day British settings despite having all of time and space to play with. Russell T Davies wants his Marvel-esque spectacle with UNIT being S.H.I.E.L.D. or the Avengers, but that was never what they were meant to be to begin with. The thinness of the characters just adds to how bland they are. Exploitation of child labour laws aside, what does Rose Noble offer to the season 1 finale? Basic exposition and then tapping at an iPad to fight against a god. It's boring and it's pointless.
They never give me proper work. They had me investigating shoplifting in Catford.
MC UNIT is a flat and beige plot device. It's not a group that actually thinks or evolves beyond that superficial sense of shininess. Without those limits of past UNIT characterization, everything just feels so insincere and only there for narrative purposes. There are no inner politics, bureaucracy, or dissent to make this organisation feel real and lived in. There's no individuality. Let's look at a really interesting dynamic in Season 2 in The Well. Here we have a group of soldiers with a clear hierarchy. Shea is the leader, with Cassio as her second in command. But they're not best mates. Shea likes the Doctor, whilst Cassio heavily dislikes him. This leads to a moment of Cassio enacting a red code to essentially mutiny and take control of the group because he believes Shea is no longer fit to lead, due to her trusting the Doctor so much. It's interesting character drama taking advantage of individuality within military institutions. It's reminiscent of Magumbo and Malcolm fighting in Planet of the Dead, the latter ready to die for the Doctor and the former being more than ready to kill Malcolm to shut the portal and keep the planet safe. Or what about Mike Yates being revealed as having joined an evil conspiracy to restart civilization? Part of a character arc that saw him disillusioned with UNIT after everything he'd gone through. There's tension there. Character growth, it's good television, taking advantage of how many different people make up the wider UNIT organisation. When was the last time someone truly challenged Kate? There's a brief flash of it in Lucky Day, but where previous eras would have used this for a character arc of her being suspended and investigated, we get nothing. There's no real consequences, nothing changes, nothing develops, so there's no reason to watch. How can UNIT be fixed? Well, the obvious answer would be to tear down that godforsaken tower. But the issues go so much deeper than that. In The Power of Three, a big deal was made out of Kate taking UNIT in a cleaner, more scientific direction. But we've never even really seen what that is, because they've remained a militaristic group, just with no consequences because Kate is this friendly figurehead. So honestly, I think Kate herself needs to go, at least for a little while. UNIT needs to return to being more faceless and confrontational, without one clear recurring leader. We need different perspectives within the organisation. People who want to protect the world from monsters, but also people who want to protect the world from the Doctor. We need power struggles. We need Pyrrhic victories, where aliens and creatures are killed when peace could have been negotiated. UNIT is understandably celebrated by fans as an institution, but it shouldn't be treated as such by the show or the characters themselves. MC UNIT seems like a perpetual backdoor pilot for a spin-off, so everything has become so stalled and stagnant. They need to be a properly integrated part of world building, with a presence all across the world as part of Earth's grounded drama. This means it needs genuine character-focused, tense drama emphasising the group's individuality and their collective humanity as a contrast to the Doctor's own sense of alien morality. I honestly think Chibnall had the right idea shutting UNIT down, albeit for the wrong reasons and with a terrible execution that he then completely reversed. UNIT needs to pick a side. It can't be intimate and humble while also being technologically advanced and sprawling. So yeah, I'd personally tear the whole thing down and rebuild it all back up. UNIT and Kate Stewart have become too interchangeable, and the whole sense of UNIT being operated by an entire collective of nations has been long forgotten. MC UNIT acts like Torchwood, outside the government and beyond the police. But it really isn't. UNIT needs to rediscover its contradictions, its failures, its limitations, and ultimately the wider impact it has on the human world. The found family needs to go. It needs to become a serious and potentially scary force of nature, constantly walking a tightrope between what we consider to be good and evil. Because at its core, that's what UNIT is, a depiction of what humanity would do in this position. It needs to both support and oppose the Doctor, which it hasn't done in a long time now. UNIT has become an albatross for Doctor Who. It's something iconic and popular, but this notability has begun to work against it. With all this flashiness, the organisation is more of a militarised PR firm than Earth's front line of defence against aliens and monsters. With a handful of recurring characters that constantly show up, it feels smaller than ever despite being more capable than ever, and that has just made them feel so repetitive and also kind of incompetent, since they basically need the Doctor to do everything for them. In The Star Beast, it was really nice to see UNIT ground commanders like Colonel Chan and Major Singh. But ever since, it's just been Colonel Ibrahim doing everything military-centric, and the extent of UNIT's ground forces are 3 soldiers who can be locked into one corridor. There's just no narrative purpose to UNIT anymore. They just exist to cut corners in modern day stories, giving easy exposition, and still giving Nick Briggs a job because he voices the Vlinks, the most useless and pointless character in modern Doctor Who history. Like seriously, he really only exists to dare going on the second page of Google. The sanitisation and MCUification of UNIT has become one of the most frustrating elements of the so-called RTD2 era, especially because of how well Davis had implemented them during his first era, effectively using multiple different supporting characters to create multiple perspectives and show their scope, whilst also not making them too powerful to overcome every threat. Sometimes they needed the Doctor, sometimes they didn't, but each time there were questions about their methods or their intentions, something lacking over the past few years as they're being presented as increasingly benevolent and unquestionably good. People often rag on the Sontaran stratagem for some reason, but you never get Kate Stewart condemning an entire squad of soldiers led by a named, developed side character to be massacred while the Doctor begs for them to be saved. And it's that kind of clashing ideology that is necessary for UNIT's existence. It's just so frustrating to me. But that's enough ranting for now. As a fan of UNIT, because this is all just coming from a place of love, I've felt really disappointed by MC UNIT. It's a huge wasted potential and just a boring narrative device. And safe to say, I don't see that changing anytime soon. So, on that terrible disappointment, Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. And I'd just like to give an extra special thank you to my Asbantium level patrons, Chris Douglas and Fallon Cortez, my Diamond level patron, Valtar, my Platinum level patron, Matthew Burns, and all my Gold level patrons, Ben Salmon, Daniel Shillito, and James Aluya Waterhouse. Thank you so much for your support.